Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Debatable Discussions podcast. Today we are not joined by any guest, however, we will be discussing the latest updates in UK politics.
So yes, today do join us for a very exciting episode. Why? Because we're going to be discussing some of the recent exciting and rather unusual issues that we've encountered in UK politics recently. The first one, which I think has probably surprised everyone, is the resignation of Angela Rayner. Someone who was Deputy Prime Minister prior to her resignation was actually becoming quite popular. So, Dejan, can you please tell our listeners, or rather remind them, what has happened with Angela Rayner?
Well, yes. Frankly, in short, what has happened is, what I think is that a lot of sort of the political and media side of the UK decided to jump in on this issue and turn it into a huge scandal, which I think was a bit unwarranted. But the sort of original cause of this is Angela Rayner bought a flat or a house. Anyway, she bought a property and didn't pay the full tax on that, didn't pay about £40,000 worth of tax. After that came out, a lot of people jumped in, including Nigel Farage, including other people, but what's been done has been done. So Angela Rayner was, I think, forced to resign, from her role both as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary, which is a bit ironic, thinking that her problem had to do with a house. But basically, she paid the incorrect stamp duty for land tax. That's it.
Yes, so exactly that. And she breached the ministerial code. She did receive legal advice. And I think, in fact, she was told to receive further advice because of her status as the Deputy Prime Minister. However, she clearly did not take that and she underpaid by £40,000. You mentioned there that she was forced to resign. And I think that was the sort of inevitable conclusion of the affair. And she had to, especially in light of her having called for Tory politicians in the past to resign over them making mistakes in their taxation affairs. A notable one was Nadeem Zahawi, who did the sort of COVID vaccine rollout under Boris Johnson. She was at the forefront of saying he had to resign over taxation affairs. Something which I think is harsh because people do genuinely make mistakes. I think she made a genuine mistake, and I think many people across the political spectrum in the past have made similar mistakes when it comes to tax. However, if she's saying that other politicians need to resign if they encounter those issues, she has to as well.
I agree. I think it's just an issue of this.
Yeah.
You can't be preaching mass resignations when you yourself don't follow the rules.
Yeah. And I think maybe some say it sort of signals something quite dismal about British politics in the sense that such a small mistake can end a career like Rayner, who she was becoming very popular. She had a large sort of connection, it seemed, with a large part of the electorate. But politicians are in the limelight. They are public, popular figures. Therefore, they do need to act correctly. And it's inevitable that mistakes happen, but they should try and minimize these. And I think in her case, there probably was room to.
Yeah, I agree. I think something that surprised me, though, was that Mr. Farage, who the listeners of the podcast now not a big fan of at all, has been making quite a big deal about this. He says he hasn't, but I mean, he's made a couple of statements, a couple, of course, for resignations, whilst he himself on his house in Clacton, which is not his house, has decided to sort of, frankly, not evade, but avoid the tax code by having his partner buy the house, that he should not have to pay that second home stamp duty. Again, something in the vicinity of £50,000.
I mean, that isn't illegal, though. Yeah, that was an illegal avoidance, not illegal.
No, it wasn't illegal, but
Yeah,
it
it's playing
was
around.
pretty much the same from a moral standpoint. I don't see much of a difference between what he has done and what Rayner's done. Frankly, I think Angela Rayner maybe is even less in the wrong because I genuinely think she made a mistake. Nigel Farage definitely did not make a mistake, and this actually brings us into our next topic, which is the latest reform conference. Going all over social media, we've seen clips of sort of Lincolnshire mayor singing "I'm an insomniac" live on stage. At the end, the British anthem started with "God Save the Queen" and ended with "God Save the King." Traditional reform fashion. A lot of other sort of speeches. But what was most worrying to me was the fact that you had these interviews at the reform conference with 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And when they were asked why they're here, they did spew out the same propaganda that is being fed, such as Reform is the only party that cares for working British people, we won't have a future, schools are not teaching about maths, they're teaching about LGBTQ agendas. I mean, John, we're in school. When's the last time you were taught about an LGBTQ
Yeah,
agenda?
that's very good. Yeah, yeah.
It's very worrying. And that question for me is why are so many people either going to the left and choosing Jeremy Corbyn, to the far left, or going to the far right and choosing Nigel Farage? I find that there's a lack of people who are sort of in the centre anymore, centre left, centre right, whatever you prescribe there, but sort of in the centre. Why are people opting for these radical parties?
I mean, firstly, I'll say that to sort of address your previous claim about Farage bringing up Rayner, if I was Farage, I think I'd do the same, and I don't blame him because I think Rayner's resignation is very symbolic of the sort of crisis that Keir's government's in, and in a way of how it has sort of been a bit shambolic so far from Sir Keir. You know, he seemed to annoy many of the people that voted him. It's been with scandals from the start, thinking of Lord Wahid Ali. So I think, I mean, harsh for him to talk a lot about it, yes, but it is symbolic of something very interesting and unfortunate for Keir's Labour government. But going back to your question, I think firstly, young people obviously have always been on the more radical side of politics. Sort of whenever you read the news and you've got a 60-year-old journalist recounting about their political life journey, they always start out as some sort of wacky communist, or in many cases, or as I don't know, some wacky member of the far right. So I think young people are more are perhaps more inclined to the extremes of politics. However, I think it's coming to the situation that, let's say, not the ordinary person, but a large majority of people in the UK are moving to Farage simply because they're disappointed by Labour,
Yeah.
and they were previously frustrated by a poor 14 years of Tory government. Farage is excelling at the moment, whether you like him or not. I mean, I don't like him the most in the sense I think he'd be not very good when he's in government, but he's always going to profit off other parties not doing well. And that sort of seemed to be the case for a while in UK politics. As I said, you know, Rayner was very popular. She was sort of seen as this working class hero, a working class hero who did own several properties, let that be. But nevertheless, you're sort of seen as this working class hero who represented a significant portion of the Labour Party. They've now lost that representation, or at least for the time being, until a new deputy leader is elected. So it's it sort of opens up the door to reform again, which is interesting. What do you think about all this, Diane?
I mean, I want to ask you another question, which is why are people going to reform and not to the Lib Dems instead?
Yeah, and that is a good question, but I think why reform and not the Lib Dems? Firstly, the Lib Dems attracts a very different kind of voter to reform. Reforms, there's a sort of, they're far more popular amongst, let's say, working class than the Lib Dems. Why? Because the Lib Dems are seen as a sort of liberal party, which is fairly exclusive to basically the south of England, which it is if you look at where Lib Dem constituencies are. There's a theme, one could say. They're a Liberal Party for the home counties, many find. I think also there's perhaps a case to say Farage's messaging is stronger than the Lib Dems. I think Sir Ed Davey is quite a good, is quite good at social media, but I think Farage, sort of, whether you like him or not, you can recognise that he's in his own league, Farage, when it comes to being a political orator, being a speaker. He excels at public media, anything to do with sort of communications. But
Yes.
I'm back to the Lib Dems. I think, Reform's a very different party to the Lib Dems in the sense that the Lib Dems do have an image which is sort of perhaps more left wing, whereas people at the UK are seeming to be quite right wing socially at the moment.
I find Farage to be more left wing than any of these other parties.
In what sense? I mean, because I'd say quite
Well,
right wing.
in the sense that he is sort of actively, I think, trying to restrict people's right of choice. How is he doing that? Well, he wants to come in. I think he plans a government of sort of quite heavy government intervention, similar to Trump's MAGA. I don't think there's anything that is sort of right wing about him, apart from this sort of label that he has been put on by society. I mean, yes, you can say he's a nationalist, yes, but I don't think from an economic perspective, I don't think there's anything right wing about
Oh
Farage or
yeah,
reform.
I agree in that sense. Economically, he's Matt Sinclair said it, and I agree with Matt Sinclair. He's sort of in fantasy land.
Yeah,
He's agreed to things that are on the left wing. He wants tax cuts, but then he wants more. He wants more sort of welfare and more welfare and benefits. A left wing idea. He's totally all over the place. But I think he's right wing, and in fact, very right wing when it comes to social issues, and that is where he'll benefit. Immigration is one. If you look at why are so many people voting for reform at the moment, the biggest issue that comes up is immigration. This immigration issue has seemed to sort of seize a huge part of the British population. I read somewhere that the middle class in Britain has become radicalised. And I
yes,
think there is an element of truth in that. You see it in Epping, these protests. You see it, I mean, I think in Canary Wharf, there have been huge protests. It's across the country. Immigration, slightly bizarrely, in my eyes, has become the forefront issue. I think it's slightly
yes.
ridiculous because, I'll be honest, I think it's totally ridiculous protesting. I think, what do they expect us? We should house them. You know, I don't understand what these people want us to do elsewhere with immigrants. I think they have a right to have accommodation. So
Yeah.
them in the hotels, I don't see what the issue is with that. I can understand that perhaps there needs to be a greater police presence if people are really concerned with, let's say, the attack on the 14-year-old girl fueled the protest in Epping. I can understand how
But
that.
again, I
Yeah.
think that is just outrageous.
Okay.
Because I think if we look statistically now
Yeah.
at 100 rapes in the UK,
Yeah.
96 of those would be done by sort of white British born people,
Yeah.
statistically speaking. Well, not 96 because Britain's 12% black and
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah. But
percentages, but an overwhelming majority, let's say 75%, will be done by white British born people. I mean, should we have more police in sort of the whitest areas of Surrey? Should we have that? Because statistically speaking, they're more likely to be rapists. I
is
mean,
it though?
I think that's
Actually,
just outrageous. The fact that you need more police because one attack happened, and then you say, oh, because this guy's an idiot, everyone coming and seeking asylum is going to do the same thing. I think that just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think these are over exaggerated protests, and I think, and I mean, you read things about. I saw a really good video yesterday by Dr. Tess Dunlop, famous historian, and actually famous. I saw a really good video yesterday by Dr. Tessa Dunlop, who's actually a very prominent Romanian historian. And she was saying that our migration crisis is not a crisis. And that is true. Or rather, our immigration crisis is not a crisis.
Yes.
There are countries with exponentially higher rates and higher numbers of immigration and illegal immigrants seeking asylum. Therefore, that just shows how this issue is exaggerated. What do you think about this, Diane? Do you think these protests are here to stay and become sort of continual issue and theme of British politics? Or
I
do you
mean,
think this is sort of a phase of British society?
I do think they're here to stay, unfortunately. I don't think they should stay because, again, I find them slightly obsolete. I don't really see their point. I don't see, again, I mean, you've got all these people now on social media being human rights experts.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but what do you want to do? You know,
Yeah.
people should have access to a doctor.
Yeah.
People should have a place to stay, and people should have something to eat. The fact that people are not allowed to work, because they are not, until their claims are processed, they are not allowed to work. I think that's an issue. I think that could be, that could be overdone. Something that Tony Blair brought in. But again, I just find it a bit difficult to imagine what the outcome would be of anything else. I mean, without immigration, this is it's the third time already. With 55 to 60% of the NHS would be
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone wants that.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously a fundamental difference though between legal and illegal immigration. But it's a relevant point.
Well, yeah, but some people that are illegal immigrants and are running from conflict areas do end up
Yeah, in
working
the
in
end.
the NHS and contributing there and in other sectors. So,
Yeah, I see that, and I think this is a phrase that's sort of been that people dislike, and I don't know why. And it's that countries are sort of built on immigration, and I think that's true. Many countries, Britain, for example, the United States, they are countries whose societies have been shaped by immigration.
yeah.
And I don't that's not a bad thing. Rather, it sort of makes us who we are today. So perhaps for our last question, Diane, we can mention Sir Keir Starmer's perhaps meteoric cabinet shuffle. In the last few days, we have seen him make some really interesting decisions in his cabinet, and in his eyes, perhaps just further refine it and perfect it to sort of equip him with the challenges which he's facing, whether that comes from reform or internally in his own party. So, can you perhaps run us through a few of these changes? And also, what do you think the consequences of these will be?
Yeah, so I think most prominently, David Lammy has
Yeah,
been promoted to Deputy Prime Minister now.
yeah,
Furthermore, I'm just trying to find every single one. Anna Turley has been appointed as minister, but without any portfolio. Alex Norris will be in the Home Office. Sir Chris Bryant will be the Department of Business and Trade. Luke Pollard is in the Ministry of Defence. Georgia Golden, Department of Education. Ellie Reeves will be Solicitor General. Lucy Rigby will be the Economic Secretary to the Treasury. Yvette Cooper is now Foreign Secretary.
that's
Again,
big.
a big move, moving from the Home Office to the Foreign Secretary. I mean, a big move, yes, not a huge one because the Home Office still is
Big.
a huge institution. Yes. Just trying to figure
I
I
mean, a few
think
others, yeah. Pat McFadden in Work and Pensions now, and also Darren Jones, the Duchy of Lancaster.
I'm
And
pretty sure, yes.
I saw a rather interesting commentary on that because those two have been previously referred to as the Today Programme Ministers, which is a sort of current affairs radio programme in the UK, primarily because they're a steady and trusted pair of hands. So I think Keir's clearly brought them closer to him,
Yes.
signalling his trust for them. And also, David Lammy is a really interesting one as well. Him being promoted to prime minister, to deputy prime minister, is a sort of sign of reward. Many are saying for his work overseas. Notably, we saw him entertain JD Vance in the Cotswolds and across London over the summer. And I think that shows that David Lamb is clearly very much favoured by Sir Keir, and he has also
Yes.
impressed on the world stage. Impressing Vance, he's probably not the easiest individual to. You sort of have to do a lot of pleasing him and Trump.
Yes.
But yeah, he's managed to make his way through and to be promoted. At the demise of Angela Rayner, who has been demoted to the backbenches. And I think probably this will be the end, at least for the meantime, of her political career.
Yes. I didn't see her coming back, to be honest, but I'd find it very difficult for her to come back after this. I mean, never say never, but
Yeah.
it was a big scandal and one that wasn't perhaps the easiest to put down under the plug, because it wasn't something such as, I don't know, she's had an affair or something like that, which you're saying, okay, it happens. Illegally not paying enough taxes on a property, especially when you sort of preach about that day in and day out, I think is very difficult to come back from.
Yeah. And well, Rayner's downfall perhaps is symbolic of what is a rather, at the moment, disastrous Labour government for many. Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed the episode. We've tried to provide a bit more commentary and our opinions to some of the most pressing and forefront issues that have appeared on the headlines in the past few weeks.
Thank you very much, and see you next week when we have a huge episode.
Yes, do tune in for that.